Hello there, my name is Andrew Woods and I'm the editorial director of B2E Media, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Digital Insight, the official podcast series of CPO Strategy and Interface magazines. Today's discussion is a procurement special brought to you in conjunction with ProcureTech, and today my guests and I will be discussing and debating the very lifeblood of digital procurement. And we're blessed with a very distinguished panel of guests today, including Ilya Levtov, the CEO of Craft, Alexander Yampolsky, the CEO of Security Scorecard, Cynthia Feig, the CEO of CSR Hub, and Lance Younger, the CEO of ProcureTech. Maybe what we could do is we could start where maybe we go around in turn and you can introduce yourself and just talk a little bit briefly about your current role. And then maybe we could just kind of get a quick snapshot, if you like, of where you see procurement right now in terms of its relationship with data and digital, just like a little snapshot of where we are right now, if that makes sense. So maybe if we started with Ilya and then go to Alexander, then Cynthia, and then Lance, and we can just learn a little bit about you and kind of where you see procurement right now.
Terrific, happy to. Is my audio coming through okay? The video is a bit bumpy.
Yeah.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Terrific, great. So hi, my name's Ilya Levtov, co-founder and CEO of Craft. Founded the company in 2015 in the UK with an original mission to collect and structure all the world's information about companies, to take that one domain, companies, and build an overall platform and resource of high quality, comprehensive information about companies, somewhat inspired by, I'm sure everyone here has used Zillow or Trulia or Rightmove or Zoopla, what they did on houses and real estate. We seek to do the same thing on companies and sectors. And as we built that, putting high quality data aggregated and collected from all kinds of digital sources that traditional data vendors, business data vendors were not even looking at. As we collected all of that and put it on the web, we started appearing quite highly in search results, Google search results for people searching for information about companies. We have about 2 million people on our website every month today looking up various pieces of information about companies. And a few years ago, we had this stunning realization that this was enormously valuable to supply chain professionals, supply chain risk managers, and procurement leaders. In fact, people in those roles were contacting us through the site and saying, wow, well, I'm looking to really improve how we understand, monitor, and map and track our global supply chain. And looks like you've got lots of information that helps us do that. And so in the last couple of years, that's been our resolute focus. It's a fantastic use case where we're thrilled to be involved in and helping to lead on. And so that's the bulk of what we do, serving large companies, Fortune 100, FTSE 100, and government entities as well, with comprehensive insight and intelligence on their supply chain.
Great. Brilliant. Thank you. And then maybe Alexander, if you could.
Sure. So my name is Alex Yampolsky. I'm a founder and a CEO of Security Scorecard. We started the company in 2014 out of a realization that we're all interconnected to each other. Yet companies don't have any KPIs, or at least did not have any KPIs or measurements to quantify the cyber risk when they dealt with their suppliers, partners. So we invented a way of how we can collect all kinds of data points from all over the world and use those data points to reduce them to a score representing the likelihood of a company to suffer a data breach, a letter grade ABCDF, and a pathway of how to improve a score. And we're used by over 1,500 plus top enterprises all over the world to report to the board to hold their suppliers and third-party vendors accountable and to make insurance underwriting decisions. And I think now is actually a great time to be in procurement. Procurement is being disrupted through proliferation of new types of information and data that enables us to make better decisions. There's all kinds of data that we can get on cybersecurity, on firmographic information, on KYC and money laundering risk, about how risky are the suppliers. You can use tools like robotic process automation and AI to automate previously manually tasks. And so, for the first time, it makes it possible for procurement to move from being a support function to being a business enabler and a value creator at the forefront of the innovation. So it's a very exciting time to be in the procurement space today.
Brilliant, thank you. And then Cynthia.
Yes, hi, nice to be here. Thank you. I'm Cynthia Figge, co-founder and CEO of CSR Hub, and I co-founded the company in 2007, and we're a big data site, and we're one of the largest aggregators of structured ESG data, environment, social governance data, covering companies worldwide. We're rating 20,000 companies and have information on another 25,000 companies. One of the challenges in the field of really understanding how are companies performing in sustainability is that there have been, over time, a proliferating number of raters. These are Wall Street or investor analysts, including also indexes, nonprofits, all types of sources that are weighing in on how our companies performing. And what we're doing is we're bringing all those different data sets, hundreds of data sets together to provide consensus scores. I'm a forerunner in the field of sustainability, and I think that for many years, professionals have been concerned about, of course, what is the impact of their company within the four walls. But the cutting edge is really to account for your sustainability impact in your value stream. And particularly in your supply chain. And so that has made, I think, the data very important for companies trying to understand what's their social and environmental footprint, and how do they really address that and reduce that. So that's a very important use case for us. We serve corporates, and we also serve investors as well as professional firms. And so increasingly what we're seeing is many advisory firms are helping their clients with this issue as well. So it's an expanding area, and data is very demanded for this application.
Brilliant, thank you. And then Lance.
Yeah, hi, my name's Lance Younger. I'm the CEO and founder of ProcureTech. ProcureTech are set on a mission to accelerate the digitalization of procurement, building that future. We're home to the ProcureTech 100, the 100 pioneering digital procurement solutions, and we're also creating a digital procurement marketplace as well. I'm in complete alignment with the other guys here, is that we're on the sort of tipping point for procurement in terms of a transformation. I think it started at the start of this decade. Most procurement functions, if you were to assess them from a digitalization or data perspective, probably sit, if you're going to score them out of 10, 3 to 4, maybe 5. You've got 1 or 2 that are leading lights. But I think they're struggling to keep up with the changes in data access, data proliferation we've talked about. And it's not because of the technology, it's because of the people. We don't have enough people with the right number of skills to be able to help procurement transform at the pace that we'd all love for that to happen. It's not a new problem. It's existed for the last 8 to 10 years, as far as I know. But it's one of the biggest problems that will limit how quickly procurement can transform themselves.
Brilliant. And as you mentioned there, you touched upon access to dynamic data in procurement. And I mean, how would we kind of see procurement of now differing to that of 5 or 10 years ago, would you say, in this realm? Maybe we could ask Elia that first.
Yeah, just taking a minute to get off mute there.
Right.
Absolutely, very very much agree with Lance that there's this realization happening in procurement teams that there's more data available. I think that's been a steady trend, and I think it's been accelerated by some of the very high profile shocks we've seen to global supply chains just in the last couple of years that have really shone an incredibly bright spotlight on the risks and challenges in globally interconnected supply chains, echoing a point Alex made. So, we just saw the demand for this just skyrocket at the start of COVID, which is just a year and a half ago. I mean, it was already there with more progressive enterprises, I think, recognizing internally that they were at risk. But there was like a starting gun got fired at the start of COVID, and then was only further exacerbated by big stories like the recent Suez Canal blockage, the SolarWinds supply chain hack, other, in particular, cyber hacks, more in Alex's wheelhouse, but thinking about Maersk and Target. I think the media focus has been a big part of kind of making everybody more aware. I don't really see that these issues were any smaller 5 years ago, but I think the awareness was, and that's what's really grown. We're also a member of a group called the Digital Supply Chain Institute, led by Sam Palmisano, who was the CEO of IBM for a decade. And, he gets called a lot and has found himself in the last year, on the nightly news every few weeks talking about supply chain disruptions and the, global impact they are having. That wasn't the case 5 years ago. So not a comprehensive answer, but there's some of what we're seeing.
I see. Anyone else like to jump in there? Maybe Cynthia?
Yeah, the world became significantly more complex. The complexity increased exponentially. We all became interconnected to each other. The good news is that there's a proliferation of data. You have IoT devices and sensors that you can attach to shipping containers. You have big data analytics capabilities, which allow companies like Craft and Security Scorecard and others to go siphon huge amounts of unstructured information and distill it into actionable insights. And so, proliferation of IoT, advancement in big data, now allows the companies to battle the exponential complexity and to make faster, smarter, safer decisions. But the key is not to have more data. The key actually is to have less data, but more actionable data that tells us exactly what needs to happen. And we live in a world where you cannot fight complexity. You can fight complexity all you want, but it's here to stay. And the uncertainty, the changes, the turbulence of the business environment is only going to continue to get bigger. So if we want to be able to win, we have to do as Darwin said. It's not the smartest or the strongest that win, but the quickest to adapt. And the quickest way to adapt to the turbulent business environment that's interconnected, exponentially more complex, is to find ways to get better insights out of the data that we have and to make, instead of reactive, to make more proactive decisions about your supply chain.
I would add that there is a challenge, though, for increasing levels of transparency and disclosure. So one of the challenges, at least from a sustainability point of view, is that what we've called dark data, that many smaller suppliers actually do not reveal very much about how they're performing. And so collecting that data can be very challenging. There's kind of two ways to get at that. One is, of course, for self-disclosure or self-reported data. and the other is to really collect and have third-party data sort of outside in. We have focused on the aggregation of third-party data, of really looking at from the outside in. And part of that is just that, because I think it's very difficult to verify company self-reported data. But I think that's the pressure on essentially transparency and disclosure has been accelerated by the events of this last year or two. And that's very exciting. And I think what's happening is that it's increasing, sort of the volume of information, and probably, as time goes on with respect to standards and regulatory changes, we'll see an improvement. So I think there is a need for more data and better data.
I see.
And I'd go back to a point that Alex made there as well, is that I think we have got lakes of data and complexity, but unless organizations are clear around what their goals are, their points of differentiation, and how that ripples into a simple set of data requirements, whether it's metrics per performance or whether it's indicators to kind of blacklist to certain organizations, or whether it's data points that enable organizations to grow, they need to be aligned to what the organization is trying to achieve. All too often what we see is that organizations are struggling in this middle ground of, they've not defined what the data is at the top. They've got lots of data in the middle, but they don't know where they're going to get the real data from in terms of the bottom that flows through and enables them to do something about it. So I think that simplicity is an imperative. Yeah.
Can I just add something? I very much agree with that point. And that's the challenge and struggle that a lot of enterprises are finding themselves in, how to filter down and get to the right answers. And the only thing we've seen, reliably successful is to take a spirit of experimentation and curiosity, and not to be hell-bent on getting the answer next month and a positive ROI for the CPO, but to say, look, it's going to take some back and forth. And that's the way we personally love to, work with clients and say, there's a ton of stuff, there's a ton of stuff we know. We've got to work together and iterate with different data sets, different models, different risk models to come to the right answers. It's going to take some time, but we make progress. And if you take a medium to long-term view, that's when you're going to get those answers and get those models working, not overnight.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's interesting, and Ilya, you mentioned this as well, is I haven't heard supply chain mentioned so much in the media, for a long time. The last 18 months. Now, I've not. It'll be on some Google stats somewhere, but it is and has been phenomenal. Whether or not people know what they're talking about when they flash it up or make reference to it is another matter. But it's definitely there. And that in itself is a good. It's good from a branding perspective. It's good from an investment perspective, and it engenders not only as to look at the maybe the risk side of things, but also the growth side of things, which are it's an imperative. Whether it's finding new ideas or basically instigating new funding lines, whatever it might be. But data can help in all those different areas.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the supply chain there, and obviously risk too. Would we say that there is more risk in the supply chain now than ever before? Maybe I could put that to Alexander.
Definitely. I think, especially, again, at least speaking from a cybersecurity perspective, which is what we do, there's definitely a lot more risk for a couple of reasons. Number one, attack surface became more complex. Information is digitized. There's IoT devices connecting to the network, so just things became more complex. That's reason number one. Number two, attackers got access to more sophisticated cyber weaponry, very complicated operations which required very unique and niche skills now have been commoditized. Ransomware as a service You can just pay somebody and they're going to launch a ransomware attack for you. For $40 a day, you can kick off a denial of service attack against a competitor. Just $40 a day for a denial of service attack. And then thirdly, we cannot control that things became more complex and that the weapons proliferated. But the third issue is what we can control, and that's the fact that most organizations don't know where to start. They're not focusing on the basics. They're not aware of the attack surface. They're not aware of what to patch. You look at many recent data breaches of SolarWinds and the JBS Foods and various others. These were basic type of techniques that were used to break into the companies, and their cyber security resilience has not been very good because they didn't measure it, they didn't know where to look. And so I would say that heightened attacker attention, complicated infrastructure, which became easier to attack because it's so complex, more weapons, and organizations not focusing on resilience but still doing the old things which don't work is what definitely led to the current state of affairs, which is probably as bad as it's ever been from a cybersecurity perspective.
Mm-hmm. I agree that risk is, I think risk has gone up dramatically in the supply chain. And I think at least from an ESG or sustainability perspective, some of the data has been backward looking. In other words, if there is some great disruption or something bad happens, then there's news ripples. And I think that is important. But now I think where I'm seeing companies shifting is they really want to know about a company's performance across all these dimensions of environment, social, and governance, so that there can be some sense of predictability in a way, that there is some ability to screen across actual performance issues in advance of some kind of a bad event or a horrible event. So I think that has really changed, and we're seeing a demand for that kind of data and really understanding, are the suppliers in my value stream, are they really measuring up? Are there some risks there in terms of what we can see around performance and benchmarking?
And I think the collaboration and partnerships between different type of providers of data on the ESG side, on business intelligence side, on cybersecurity side is so important to really make a holistic assessment of the risk for a company. I mean, if you want to know how healthy you are, you're not going to go only to a cardiologist and say that you're done. You're going to go to a dentist. You're going to go to your general physician. You're going to get the blood work. But in supply chain, people look at one thing and they're done. That's not going to give you a holistic picture. Just looking at cybersecurity posture that we provide is not going to help you if a company goes bankrupt tomorrow. And conversely, if you look only at whether the company is financially healthy and safe cybersecurity, but they have a terrible ESG record, that's not very good either. So really the magic happens when you start combining different type of data sets and collaboration, and that's how you can make more holistic decisions.
Yeah. And we've go on. Go on, Ilya.
May I just very, very much want to agree with that. Love the medical metaphor there, spot on. And I've just got on a screen here, we're working with one of the large systems integrators, sharing kind of a list of the dimension, some of the top risk domains they're looking at. And it starts with, these table stakes of financial related, creditworthiness, liquidity, insolvency. But then it's getting into what's the labor market risk and the human capital signals you can observe, health, safety, and environment, attaching then to ESG and corporate social responsibility, compliance violations, watch lists all around the world, state ownership, right? Geopolitical issues coming in, cyber risk, obviously, and then also physical security risks. So not an exhaustive list, but multifaceted, very much to Alex's point. And last thing I'll say, sort of echoing, the earlier question about what's changed. One of the things I think has changed, and Alex alluded to it, is that people have been looking at primarily the financial measures. It was actually one of the insights that led us to starting the company, that professionals conflated company insight with financial insight, meaning that if we just look at the financial measures, that's like going to the cardiologist and thinking we're done. But we recognize that there are all these other views and lenses and streams of insight if you only open your eyes and see them. And that's what leads to this really comprehensive picture. So very much agree with Alex's sentiment there.
Yeah, and I think what happened during COVID as well, that acted as an accelerator to create the collaboration between different sources of data and different providers of technology, where people rapidly realized that they couldn't all swim in their own swim lanes. To be successful rapidly, people had to work together in where they wouldn't have done in the past. And for procurement, especially the digital procurement ecosystem, we're seeing that those ecosystem plays become even more important. You can't just go to one provider for everything, because they're not going to provide you with the depth or the skills that you require across all the different capability areas that we're looking at, to make the whole body healthy, as it were. So that collaboration, acceleration, and the ecosystems becomes incredibly important. The other thing I would add as well is that consumers are driving a fundamental change to what we do and how we do this. And Cynthia, you're right, the heart of this, in that 5-10 years ago you had a small but strong community of people saying, well, this matters. Can we change what we're buying, where we're buying it from? But consumers couldn't see the supply chain. They couldn't influence the supply chain. But literally over the last 3 to 5 years, they have, and they are. And that's testament to everything that's been done in the past, but also everything that's being done now to kind of make it easier for consumers to vote with their feet one way or another.
Absolutely.
And obviously you touched upon it there a little bit in terms of CSR and sustainability, and the role that procurement can play in that. I'd like to ask Cynthia, I mean, how does procurement prioritise the right kind of data and then maximise its impact in terms of sustainability?
Yeah, well, I think that from a corporate point of view, when companies begin really trying to engage in this and prioritize sustainability in their procurement decisions, oftentimes what they have to do is really start to think about spend. They have to think about how do they approach this in terms of where do they even start? And that's a question that we get quite a bit. How do we start this? How do we set policies? How do we set flags? How do we recognize risk? How do we understand the data? And the data is telling, typically saying a lot, but it's often difficult to understand it if you're new to some of these disciplines. And then, importantly, how do we actually integrate it with other types of data? So how, which is, the partnership question, and how are companies doing that? Because so often what has happened in the field of sustainability as we've seen data mature is that it has been a standalone data set. And that companies haven't quite understood how do we now bring in what used to be called non-financial, and what I think everyone now understands is clearly ESG is financial, but how do we actually integrate that? And so that's part of the journey too, and often it's really mixing, as I said, it's really actually mixing some data sets of what are companies saying about themselves, but also what are others that are experts in the field, how are they assessing suppliers? It's the sophistication for companies that are out in front is increasing tremendously. And so, but then at the same time, there are many companies that are just getting started. I think part of the pull, of course, has been climate change. We haven't talked about that, but I think that as time goes on, social events and climate change are really, really dramatically going to push better management of the supply chain and incorporation of data and understanding of risk and scope 3, and really putting some demands, in place. So, I think that's what we're seeing right now.
I see. Anyone else got any thoughts on sort of kind of sustainability and?
Well, I just say just such a welcome trend, and for as we see it, it expands to the broader point of trust. I think people are asking, quite rightly, what are the companies that they can trust? And of course that operates over all kinds of dimensions, but sustainability is a really important one, and it's just fantastic to see that trend and people caring about it, and us being able to help, everyone here being able to help shine a light on who's doing good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd agree. That trust and authenticity. Now, people can see it. In the past, you maybe it was a little bit of a leap of faith, but now people can see it and feel it, and it's becoming more democratized in terms of how people access this information, but also how people act on it as well. Which I think's fundamental. If you're going to do anything at scale, if you're going to kind of make a change to address climate, then it has to be at scale, and we're not going to be able to do that without the digitalization and data that's required to support that.
And obviously, in terms of data and the capturing of it and the understanding of it, would you now say that this is a unique opportunity in time for procurement to act as an intelligence hub, if you like, across multiple domains? And obviously, I put that one to Max.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I've been lucky enough. I've spent most of my career in procurement, and it's a pretty unique role in that it does act as you mentioned, as a hub across many disciplines and one of the key interfaces into the supply chain for organizations, especially manufacturing and direct heavy organizations. That's magnified, and procurement has got a fundamental role to play there. In some organizations, they recognize that, and you need the strong supply chains build, strong teams build, heavy investment, and others maybe not as much. But with that, I think what procurement and the leadership within procurement, with help from other functions, in particular, the CIO, CDO, basically need to not only look at the data and the digital sort of apps that we see, but the total digital stack. Because what we often find is that organizations, basically will buy an app or a solution, but they haven't built the infrastructure that works around that. And that might be the interface, so the supplier portal or the employee portal, but it also may be the data lake or the data and where it's pulled from. So for me, that's one of the bigger things for organizations to understand. Yeah, understand what they're trying to achieve, the objectives, but understand it's not just going to be one or two apps you're going to plug in, but you need to build the whole stack and the whole architecture to be able to support that.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Anyone else want to jump in? Anyone else got any?
Yeah. My two cents on that one would be clear vision that the days of procurement just being focused on minimizing costs are over. There is so much more strategic value to the overall business that procurement can drive. It's tremendously exciting, the opportunity and the road ahead for innovation and really high impact.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Lance and Ilya mentioned is spot on. Given transparency about different type of facets drives a change in behavior, right? And a change in behavior drives a change in suppliers' behavior, because if they're getting less money because they're not paying attention, for example, to diversity at the board level or diversity in their management team, and they're seeing a decline in business, it's going to make them change their behavior, even if they wouldn't think of it themselves. And so I think transparency of the data, ability to take data sets that were previously hard to analyze, and through the advances in AI, in optic recognition and RPA, being able to distill those data sets and to derive new insights and make them easily available to consumers, to companies, to businesses, will inevitably result in improvements across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I think that procurement has just become so much more strategic as the function is really asking for their suppliers to provide. I mean, you're just spot on. I mean, things that we wouldn't have thought before. What's the diversity of your board, or what is the diversity of your management team? And we wouldn't have thought that that would be a requirement or something that somebody's scrutinizing as a key indicator of supplier performance. And so those kinds of things have really shifted. And I think that's going to increase. So the demand for that kind of, I mean, we're seeing companies that are basically asking their suppliers to also conform to global protocols, such as the UN Global Compact and the SDGs, or other ways in which they can demonstrate that they're understanding and really contributing to changing the world and improving the world, because it's so business critical. And that I think is a really big shift. So yeah, definitely procurement becomes much more strategic in this process.
I think what I find as well is, and you kind of touched upon it there, Cynthia, as well, is that procurement has always assessed suppliers in terms of their overall performance, but the more advanced ones have looked at the true capabilities of the organization. So they don't look at the outcome of just the financial performance, which is a lagging indicator, but they're looking at the team makeup that delivered that performance. And so it becomes even more important that, so for example, with Ilya and Craft, you can go in now and you can look at, okay, what the headcount is, but you can actually go the step beyond that. You can see the shape of the organization. And if you're wanting an organization that is basically good at being innovative, and then you can see how many people sit within their development teams. And if they don't have anybody in the development team, then they've got no capability to deliver on it. And the same way, Cynthia, you talk about the diversity of a board or a management or leadership team. If you can't see that, then you don't know whether or not they're going to be able to deliver on that. So I think what one of the key things we're getting from increased data is a better understanding of the capability of our suppliers, and therefore whether they can deliver in the future against what we need them to do as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And as a kind of a final closing line from each of you, what would you say are the data and intelligence priorities in the future for procurement? Maybe we could start with Cynthia.
Well, I think it's a really exciting opportunity, especially as companies have become, if they're outsourcing or they have a very complex value stream. I think that the scrutiny and sort of the responsibility for this looking at the impact of a business, its social impact and its environmental impact, is going to make the management of procurement very integral to addressing and kind of solving social problems and quite frankly improving business performance. So I think that the big important trend as we go forward is this taking responsibility for what's outside of the walls and really understanding at a deep level what's happening in and then holding your supply chain accountable. So I think that's going to be the most important thing going forward.
Alexander?
So, just like investor relations teams in many companies are responsible and they're looking at the credit scores for those companies, we are seeing the same type of a shift happening for investor relations teams caring about non-credit rating type of measurements. For example, security rating measurements, and making sure that the companies groom how they appear to others. I think the real gold in the future, as we look at the data that will be the most useful and actionable, will come out of two things. One, collaboration between different data set providers, not just one type of a provider, but multiple. And the second one, combining the outside in data as well as the contributory inside out data, where the companies also provide their version of a story combined with the external intelligence collected. I think this inside out plus external will be the real gold in driving the transformation.
Yeah, and it's my typical consulting answer would be basically business understand what your objectives are, then prioritize the data you need behind that. But right where I am right now, I'm kind of all in behind Cynthia and anything and everything that's related to kind of sustainability in the broader sense of the word. Is that because I think many organizations will find their own level with regards to what's the best data for them, but I think we need to over-index when it comes to the planet, people, and prosperity. So I think we need to over-index on those things, because otherwise we will not see a step change in those things. So that would be my priority.